In June of 1940, a Swiss pilot flying a Messerschmitt Bf 109, purchased from Germany before the war, locked onto a Luftwaffe bomber that had crossed into Swiss airspace and shot it down. Then he shot down another. Within days, Swiss fighters had downed 11 German aircraft over their own territory, and Adolf Hitler was furious. Germany drew up Operation Warthegau, a sabotage plan targeting Swiss airfields. And Switzerland, the country the world remembers as the principled island of peace at the center of the war, quietly made a deal. It stopped intercepting German planes. It started forcing down Allied bombers instead. Over 100 American aircraft interned on Swiss soil. Neutrality, it turned out, was negotiable. And Switzerland negotiated it at a profit. That is one fact. Here are several more. And by the time we reach the last one, you may find that the war you learned about in school, the one from the movies, the one from your grandfather's careful silence, is not exactly the war that happened. Start with the money, because Switzerland did. The independent commission of experts, known as the Bergier Commission, established by the Swiss government itself in 1996, spent 6 years in the archives and published findings that should have ended the neutrality myth permanently. The Swiss National Bank purchased at least 1.6 billion Swiss francs worth of gold from the German Reichsbank between 1939 and 1945. The commission found that Swiss authorities knew, as early as 1941, that Germany's gold reserves could not account for the volume being sold. The math was simple. The gold was stolen, looted from the central banks of occupied nations, and in some cases taken from the bodies of Holocaust victims, personal possessions, and dental gold remelted into bars with the original markings filed off. The Commission's language was precise and damning. Swiss institutions facilitated the financing of the German war effort, and the responsibility of the Swiss financial center was considerable. But it was not only gold. Swiss railways allowed German war material to pass through the Gotthard and Simplon tunnels. Swiss factories sold precision instruments, jewel bearings for bomb sites, and machine tools to Germany throughout the war. Switzerland was not standing apart from the conflict. It was servicing it, armed, calculating, and profitable. The gold in those vaults still had the fingerprints of the dead on it, and it took half a century for anyone to open the books. Now, France. If you grew up in an English-speaking country, you absorbed the surrender myth so early, you may not remember learning it. The jokes, the white flags, the assumption of cowardice baked into a generation of punchlines. Here is what the punchlines leave out. In the Battle of France, May 10 through June 25, 1940, French forces suffered approximately 90,000 killed and over 200,000 wounded. 6 weeks, 90,000 dead. That is roughly 1,500 French soldiers killed every single day for 46 consecutive days. For comparison, the United States suffered approximately 2,500 killed on D-Day, and we remember that day as one of the bloodiest in American military history. France sustained that toll daily for 6 weeks running, and the world remembers only the surrender. The German army paid for its victory too. 27,000 killed, 111,000 wounded, 18,000 missing. These are not the casualty figures of an army walking through an open door. What happened at Sedan in May 1940 was not a collapse of will. It was an operational catastrophe. The French High Command had committed its best units forward into Belgium under the Dial-Breda Plan. The German breakthrough came through the Ardennes. Terrain the French had identified as a vulnerability, but defended with lower quality reserve divisions. Karl-Heinz Friese, a German military historian at the Bundeswehr's own research office, demonstrated that the Ardennes gamble was reckless and nearly failed. Had French armored reserves been committed differently, the entire operation could have stalled. The Blitzkrieg legend was built after the fact. In the moment, it was a dice roll. And the fighting did not end with the armistice. At Bir Hakeim in June 1942, a Free French brigade of roughly 3,700 men held off Rommel's Afrika Korps for over 2 weeks in the Libyan desert, buying time for the British 8th Army. Rommel himself noted the tenacity of the French defense in his papers. By 1944, the French Expeditionary Corps under General Juin was fighting through Italy, and the 1st French Army under de Lattre de Tassigny landed in southern France and fought to the German border. France bled at a rate that would have broken any army. And then the world forgot. Speaking of things the world got wrong, let us talk about the tank that was supposed to win the war for Germany and could not cross a bridge. The Tiger. I weighed 57 tons. It required specialized rail cars for transport because it could not be driven onto a standard flat car. Most European bridges could not support it. Its Maybach engine was consistently overstressed. Its overlapping road wheels, an elegant engineering solution on paper, clogged with frozen mud on the Eastern Front, locking solid in Russian winter and immobilizing a vehicle that no field crane within 50 kilometers could recover. Maintenance required more man-hours per kilometer than any Allied equivalent. The Panther, often praised as the best medium tank of the war, debuted at Kursk in July 1943. Of the roughly 200 Panthers committed, a devastating number broke down before they reached the battlefield. Final drive and transmission failures. The engines were the same overstressed Maybach design. Albert Speer himself, under interrogation by the U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey after the war, described the chronic unreliability of German heavy tanks and the collapse of production quality as factories were bombed and slave labor replaced skilled workers. Here are 2 numbers that tell the entire story. Total Tiger Thermofort production across the entire war, approximately 1,347 units. Total Sherman production, approximately 49,234. A Tiger cost roughly 300,000 Reichsmarks. A Sherman cost between $44,000 and $64,000, depending on variant, and could be repaired in the field by a crew with standard tools. The Sherman had real weaknesses. The early 75mm arm variants were genuinely vulnerable to German heavy armor, and the crews knew it. But the Shermans were there. They were reliable. They were replaceable. They came off assembly lines that stretched hundreds of meters in Detroit, overhead cranes moving in rhythm, men and women on the line building tanks the way Ford built cars. The German preference for complex, heavy, low production run vehicles was not engineering genius. It was a strategic catastrophe. You cannot win a war of attrition with a machine that breaks down every 90 kilometers and takes a week to fix. Too heavy to cross a bridge, too complex to fix in a field, and outnumbered 40-1 by the tanks that actually won the war. Now, if your grandmother ever told you to eat your carrots so you could see in the dark, she was repeating one of the most successful intelligence deceptions of the Second World War. And she had no idea. During the Blitz, the British Ministry of Information promoted the story that RAF night fighter pilots owed their extraordinary success to a diet rich in carrots, which supposedly improved night vision. The Ministry of Food even created a propaganda character, Dr. Carrot, a cheerful anthropomorphic carrot in a top hat printed on posters across Britain. Carrots were one of the few foods not rationed, so the government genuinely wanted people to eat more of them. But the campaign had a second purpose, and it was secret. The real reason RAF night fighters were finding German bombers in the dark was airborne interception radar, the AI Mark IV and its successors. A cathode ray tube the size of a saucer, glowing green in a cramped cockpit. The pilot could not see the enemy. The radar operator called the intercept from a phosphor dot moving across the screen. It was not carrots. It was not superhuman eyesight. It was a piece of British engineering so secret that an entire propaganda campaign was built to explain away its results. R.V. Jones, the head of British scientific intelligence, described the broader deception culture. We had to conceal not only that we had radar, but how good it was and what we could do with it. The carrot story was part of that concealment, and it worked so well that 80 years later, long after the radar was declassified, long after the war ended, long after everyone involved is gone, people still believe that carrots improve your eyesight. Beta-carotene is a precursor to vitamin A, and severe deficiency does cause night blindness. But eating extra carrots when you are not deficient does absolutely nothing. The myth outlived the war, the secret, and the generation that created it. A green dot on a radar screen won the air war. The carrots were a lie, and it was a magnificent one. If you are watching this and your family has a connection to the war, a grandfather who served, a grandmother who worked the factory line, a great uncle who never came home, tell us about them in the comments. Who were they? Where did they serve? What did they tell you? Or what did they never say? Those stories matter, and they are disappearing faster than any of us want to admit. Now let us talk about where the war was actually won. Because if you grew up in the West, you probably learned the wrong answer. At the time of D-Day, June 6, 1944, the day American and British schoolchildren learn as the turning point, Germany had approximately 228 divisions deployed on the Eastern Front. In all of Western Europe, there were roughly 58, many of them under strength, recovering, or second-line formations. 4-1. The war, the Western viewer remembers, was the secondary theater. Roughly 80% of German military casualties were inflicted by the Soviet Union. The Eastern Front consumed the Wehrmacht. The Soviet Union paid for this in a currency that defies comprehension. Between 24 and 27 million dead, military and civilian combined. 1 in 7 Soviet citizens, every family, every street, a generation of men erased from the demographic record so completely that the imbalance was visible in Soviet population data for decades. And the Red Army did not win by throwing bodies at the problem, despite what a generation of Cold War-era Western histories implied. That narrative, the Asiatic hordes, has its roots in German wartime propaganda. By 1943 and 1944, Soviet operational art had reached a sophistication that the Germans themselves documented with alarm. Operation Bagration, launched on June 22, 1944, just 16 days after D-Day, was a masterpiece of deception, coordination, and mobile warfare. The Soviets used maskirovka, systematic military deception, to convince the Germans the main attack would come in Ukraine. Then they hit Belarusia with a force that destroyed Army Group Center. 28 German divisions effectively ceased to exist. The losses Germany suffered in Bagration exceeded those inflicted by the entire Western campaign. In August 1944, the Soviets marched approximately 57,000 German prisoners of war through the streets of Moscow. The column stretched for kilometers. When it passed, street-washing trucks followed. A deliberate gesture. A verdict delivered in water and silence. None of this diminishes what the Western Allies did. Lend-Lease was critical. Roughly 400,000 American trucks, primarily Studebakers, kept the Red Army's logistics moving. American aluminum, machine tools, and aviation fuel were essential inputs to Soviet production. Khrushchev later claimed that Stalin privately admitted the Soviet Union could not have sustained the war without Lend-Lease. The strategic bombing campaign degraded German industry. D-Day opened the front that accelerated the end. But the idea that America won the war or that Normandy was the turning point. That is not what the evidence shows. Stalingrad and Kursk had already broken the Wehrmacht by 1943. D-Day was the second front. The first was already winning. And the people fighting that first front were not all men. Approximately 800,000 Soviet women served in the military during the war, not as nurses behind the lines, as pilots, snipers, machine gunners, tank crew, and medics under fire. Lyudmila Pavlichenko was credited with 309 confirmed kills as a sniper, one of the deadliest in documented history. The 588th Night Bomber Regiment, the Nachthexen, the Night Witches, as the Germans called them, flew over 23,000 sorties in Polikarpov PO-2 biplanes. Open cockpits, wood and canvas airframes designed as trainers, not combat aircraft. No cockpit lights, no parachutes, because the weight saved by leaving them behind meant carrying one more bomb. They flew in the dark, cut their engines to glide silently over German positions, released their bombs, then restarted their engines and climbed away. The Germans reportedly feared them enough to promise an Iron Cross to any pilot who shot one down. One Soviet woman sniper, her testimony collected by Svetlana Alexievich decades later, recalled, "After the first kill, I couldn't eat for 3 days. After the 100th, I didn't think about it anymore." That sentence holds the entire war. There is one more myth, perhaps the most dangerous one, and it must be named directly. The idea that the German regular army, the Wehrmacht, fought a clean conventional war while the SS committed the atrocities. This narrative was not an accident. It was deliberately constructed during the Cold War, when West Germany became a NATO ally and former Wehrmacht officers were needed for the new Bundeswehr. It was useful. It was also a lie. The Wehrmacht's own orders tell the story. The Commissar Order of June 6, 1941, explicitly directed the execution of captured Soviet political officers. Wehrmacht units participated directly in mass killings on the Eastern Front, reprisal executions of civilians, logistical support for Einsatzgruppen, death squads, and the administration of prisoner of war camps, where approximately 3.3 million of the 5.7 million Soviet prisoners taken by Germany died. Starved, frozen, shot, under Wehrmacht custody, not SS, Wehrmacht. The army that just followed orders issued the orders. And one last thing, because it hides in the most ordinary place. Hitler did not build the Autobahn. The first Autobahn-style highway in Germany, the WWII in Berlin, opened in 1921. The Cologne-Bonn motorway opened in 1932, the year before Hitler took power. The plans for a national motorway network were developed during the Weimar Republic. Hitler's regime appropriated the project, accelerated construction using forced labor, and turned it into a propaganda triumph. But by 1938, only about 3,000 kilometers were complete against a planned 20,000. And almost no German could use them. Car ownership remained vanishingly low. The promised Volkswagen was never delivered to civilian buyers, and the highways served primarily as military transport routes. He stole the credit for roads that were already being built, and then most of his people could not drive on them. These are not obscure findings, buried in untranslated archives. The Bergier Commission report is public. Frieser's operational history won academic awards. Jens's tank reliability data comes from German wartime maintenance logs. The Commissar Order was entered into evidence at Nuremberg. The Dr. Carrot posters are in the British National Archives. Every one of these myths could have been corrected decades ago. The evidence was always there. The question is why the myths persisted. And the answer is that myths are comfortable. The French surrender myth lets you feel superior. The German engineering myth lets you believe the Allies won against impossible odds. The Swiss neutrality myth lets you believe you can stay clean while the world burns. The carrot myth is just a nice story your grandmother told you, and nice stories are hard to give up. But the people who fought this war, all of them, on every front, in every uniform, and the millions who wore no uniform at all, deserve better than comfortable myths. The French soldiers who died at 1,500 a day for 6 weeks deserve to be remembered as soldiers, not as punchlines. The Soviet women who flew canvas biplanes without parachutes deserve to exist in the Western memory of the war. The 3 million Soviet prisoners who starved in Wehrmacht camps deserve to have their killers correctly identified. The victims whose gold sat in Swiss vaults deserve to have the transaction recorded honestly. If you've learned something here that changes how you understand this war, subscribe. Not because we need the numbers, because the record needs to be kept. The people who lived through this war are nearly all gone now. What remains is what was written down, what was filmed, what was testified to under oath, what was filed in archives in a dozen countries. The documented war. It is more complicated than the movie version. It is more painful. It is also more true. And the dead, all of them, are owed at least that.